Hello, and welcome to our Paid Search Association webinar. I am extremely excited to have Brad Geddes here. If you do not know who he is, you're going to learn now on this webinar. An amazing paid search practitioner and owner of Analysis. And today we're going to get into AI. And without further ado, I'm going to drop off the screen because we have a lot of content to get through and let Brad take over.
So we're only going to kind of get into AI, right? In reality, account management sort of went through a split about 5 years ago, where you had old school who grew up managing accounts one way, and you have a different group who grew up like managing accounts under recommendation systems. And we're going to look at how to sort of merge the management while overseeing things. So, like Sarah said, I'm Brad Geddes. I've been doing this for 27 years in December. So I've seen a lot of trends over the years, but in reality, they all go through the same evolution. So, like we look at bid automation, right? Bid automation started all manual. And then the first automation for bids was actually Windows 2000 supporting macros. And then we had ways to automate manual bids. And then Google launched Conversion Optimizer, later called CPA bidding, in '07. You know what? It was terrible. And it was terrible for about 3 to 4 years until it had the data and suddenly wasn't. And then, Google launched ROAS bidding in 2013. It was bad. And after 4 or 5 years, it suddenly became good. Right? And this is the problem with machine learning is it doesn't get 5% better year over year or 10% better. It's consistently good or bad or whatnot until suddenly it has a data density level that it does great. Right? And we can apply this to almost everything. So when you think about new automation, right? Google brings out something new and they publish case studies that are clearly cherry picked on how something works. And Google is great about talking about things in the way they wish it worked versus our reality. And you have your early adopters and testers of something new, and then you see a pullback, right? People say, wow, this is not working for us, or we don't trust this yet. And often you hear like the Google tax, right? This is essentially you spending money on a Google product that's terrible because once it hits good data, it'll be great. And then over a few years, then it's usually a few years, Google learns, right? And adoption's pretty slow. Then suddenly it's really good. And that's when adoption picks up. And we can put pretty much any Google feature against this and see that same thing over the years. Like if we look at things right now, right? AI Max, brand new. Wouldn't say good or bad about it whatsoever yet. I have some thoughts, but that's for later. And then we think about pullback, right? People tried this and they've said, no, right? Auto created assets, RSAs without pinning, PMAX for lead generation, right? This is still a pullback. And then, but we look at PMAX or retail. It's doing well for most people, not everyone. There's some search issues, right? Broad match and phrase match. This is interesting. There's been a pullback on some of these for good reasons. URL expansion. But then we say, what is finally working? Well, all of Google's automated bidding is great for 99% of people, right? Display, audiences, remarketing, most of video. It can be a bit inconsistent, right? And demand gen somewhere in the middle here, right? So as we look at adopting automation, we have to think, how does it work today? What do we need to look at to make sure it is going to work for us? Or do we need to be cautious right now and wait for it to actually get enough data? And so, when we sort of look at account management, just day-to-day account management, right? When I started, again, this was a couple decades ago, this was considered advanced. I had a task list. This is clearly not advanced, but for the time it actually was. Right? And then over the next few years, we went to project management, which is still great today, right? Or calendars. I made a calendar system 14 years ago, and 10,000 people by 2011 were using this. Right? So, and this is how accounts were managed for years. And you had either your tasks, your project management, your calendar. You knew what needed to get done. And then Google said, hey, We'll just tell you it needs to get done. And so we have this other group of marketers who grew up with this being their homepage, right? They didn't need tasks, they didn't need project management. Google told them there's what needs to get done. And the other groups are sort of very deliberate in what they did. But one of the issues is there's a lot of dark patterns in how Google creates things. So like if we just glance at this recommendation, right, it just looks like, hey, we're going to make 9,000 more if we spend 5,000 more. That sounds great, right? Pretty easy. That's an easy yes. Until we look and say, hold on, we're going to spend 9,000, get 9,000 more per week, but it's going to cost us 5,000 a day. Well, that's not good math, right? And this is where, with these recommendations, you need to know why it's being recommended, what the outcomes expected are. And while Google's good at making recommendations, they don't really tell you what their criteria is, right? We'll often see, Google will say, switch the bid method to, CPA bidding, and without a reason why. And then a week later in the same campaign, you'll get a recommendation for I switched to ROAS bidding. And then a month later, it'll be like, you'll do better with max conversion value bidding, right? And it'll make recommendations that doesn't tell you why they're recommending it. Now, I'm not going to rail against Google recommendations. The repairs category is amazing. It's fantastic to use. It's just a different way people manage accounts. So when we kind of think about the pros and cons of recommendations, right? The pro, if you want to spend more, Google will help you. Now, that isn't necessarily a negative thing, right? Many people want to scale, they want more impressions. So Google's looking for how to increase, right, your reach. Now, some of these are going to be good, some aren't, right? But it doesn't take revenue into account. Google wants control of your ad serving, and it ignores what many of us consider essential tasks in the system. Or you're never going to say Google's going to recommend you add negative keywords. Not a recommendation, right? But we all know that's pretty important to management. So, when you look at people who've been managing accounts for usually more than 5 or 10 years, right? They use task-based systems. Now, the good, you don't miss anything. The bad, it takes a long time to find out what needs to get done, right? And that's the bonus of recommendations is you're focused on actionable data, right? But the rules are predetermined, and not all systems can you overwrite that sort of recommendation. So, because in for many years, management was about control, right? In reality, paid search optimization meant we take control from Google for ourselves. That's no longer the case, right? We realize we have to give up some control. Maybe not all of it. We got to give up some control, and it's a lot more about guardrails. Now, when match types changed about 4 years ago, and Google got much better at ROAS bidding and so forth. You saw a lot of people speaking about guardrails. Hey, you need to put guardrails around your account. And one of the problems was this word was tossed about, but it was never defined. And some of the reasons for that is a lot of it's really obvious of what a guardrail is, but that was years ago when people were more focused on control. And so what we see with a lot of newer managers is because they didn't grow up needing control, some of the inherent ways accounts are built aren't sort of ingrained in them. And so, I want to talk a few minutes about guardrails. And some of these are obvious, some are not. But your biggest guardrail is actually just your campaign structure. Are you only on search? Are you on display select? What's your budget? How do you split up budgets by campaign? Are you in the right locations? What's your bid method? These are guardrails. Right now, I mean, they seem basics. You have to choose all these things, but they dictate a lot about how AI works within your framework. Now, where it gets complicated is in Google Ads, there's a lot of ways to do the same thing, right? So let's say I have an account and I have 50 locations, right? That's a lot of locations. So I can make one campaign. I could use ad customizers. You know what? Easy to update ads. I've got one ad per ad group or two ads per ad group. Scaling is easy. I want to change budgets. I just change a single budget, but I can't change budget by location. I can't easily set up a special by location. If a manager of one locations were to say, hey, can you just spend $1,000 more just for us? I can't do it. Right. But I have great data density and aggregation for bidding. I can go the other way. I could say 50 campaigns, one per location. So I can easily manage budget. Any specials, ads can be easily done by location, but I have less data aggregation for bidding and I have a much larger account to manage. So there's not a right choice here, right? It's based upon what are the goals of the account and how do you want the automation to work or how much control do you want versus the machine? And we can mix and match automation. Now, I see a lot of people who think we've got to use the same bid tech across our account. This is a company that sells electric fireplaces. In the US, in the Northeast, most people have fireplaces built in their house. They don't make a lot of sales in the Northeast, but they want to, of course, show up there, but they don't have enough sales to use return on ad spend bidding. So they do CPA bidding. Now in the South, they do great. They have most of their sales. So they do ROAS bidding. For a brand, they use target impression share. Now, what makes their sales really go up is a forecast of snow. So they keep a campaign around. Hey, it's going to snow this weekend. They quickly change the geography in the ad. They change the geography for location. They launch it. It has no previous data. It's been paused for a while. So they manually bid. You can mix and match this all you want to. But your first audit, your first thing you should look at to make sure you have your guardrails set up correctly is your campaign settings. It is super common to see accounts where, hey, campaign one is Puerto Rico, US, Virgin Islands, and 213 exclusions. Campaign three is the entire US. Then they go back. So they have two completely different ways of reaching users, but all these campaigns want to reach the same people. In other cases, ad scheduling is Monday to Friday, 9 to 7. Other times it's all day, 7 to 10. Other days it's all day long, right? So the ad scheduling was set up for that campaign when that campaign was built. But when the next campaign was built, no one went back and looked, are we consistent with everything else? And so consistency across campaigns, as it makes sense. You may have some campaigns obviously using different bid method, different locations. You may do ad scheduling on purpose that way. But if they're not consistent, that's usually the first step to saying, this is why these keywords aren't displaying properly because the way Google does their rules, we have campaigns that are restricted in their ad serving. Now, the most important guardrail that exists, besides your budget, right, is ad group organization. And this is a simple concept that is poorly done in a lot of accounts. And hopefully most of you have great ad group organization. When we think of search, right, someone does a search, and if the search term matches your keywords, then an ad can show that should be relevant to your business. If someone clicks on it, they go to your website that should be relevant to the keyword in the ad, right? I mean, that's a pretty simple concept. And then, Google introduced responsive search ads. And that was 7 years ago, I think now. And with it, they changed the story of ad group organization, right? Google came out and said, give us your keywords, give us your assets, we'll make this work for you. And the story sounds great, right? So what we saw and continue to see are a lot of campaigns with many, many fewer ad groups that we would have seen 10 years ago. Now, this is actual keywords and assets from an account. And this is a single ad group, and their assumption was if we have New York City dog friendly hotel as a keyword, and we have dog friendly hotel as an RSA asset, Google would of course show that asset with that keyword. Now, what actually happens is that the New York City dog friendly hotel had 19,000 impressions, the keyword. The asset had 4,000. Most people who searched, dog friendly hotel were either seeing Times Square hotel or downtown hotel. And their big stick is they're pet friendly, right? They have special rooms for cats and dogs and so forth, right? That's a big thing to them. And Google doesn't match this up. And so this is where, reorganizing to say, does every asset, and I mean every asset, work for every keyword in that ad group? If not, need new ad groups. And while this sounds like it's time consuming, it is. It's evergreen. And when I say evergreen, I mean this is a slide from 2005. This is a 20-year-old slide. So you can tell how bad my design skills were 20 years ago. And it's a simple story, right? If you have an ad that says John's Plumbing Service, serving London, call for an appointment, and you have the keywords, London plumbing, emergency plumbing, overflowing toilet, and that was a common ad group. And then you ask a simple question. If someone does a search emergency plumbing and they see these two ads, what are they going to click on? Right? It's really obvious. You're going to click on the emergency plumbing service. You search that term, your basement's flooding right now. You don't want to just call for some random appointment, right? Who works weekends? Who's here now? And this is that ad group organization that if you set this up that way 20 years ago, we see accounts that's still the same ad group organization 20 years later, and it still works. And it's time consuming. It's so important. And if you're not sure where to start, quality score ad relevance is actually fantastic recommendation here. Because if you have an ad group with some keywords below average ad relevance and some keywords above average ad relevance, Google is telling you that this ad is not going to work for that keyword. It works for these, which means the ad has potential, but it won't work for these. It needs to be a different ad group, right? And that's what's important as we sort of think about this is we're not just doing this for keywords to ads that are great for users, and that relevance is very important for the user bases. It helps their quality score, which also does a lot of positive things in the account. Now, second big guardrail, targeting and bidding. So when you have multiple campaigns in your account, Google goes to a hierarchy system to determine which ad and campaign and so forth will show an ad for that search. So what happens is someone does a search and then Google says, how many different campaigns have a keyword that matches this query? If there's only one, that one shows. If there's multiple campaigns and there's not a PMAX campaign, then Google looks at what is the most restrictive campaign, right? That means that the campaign that serves to the smallest geography, the smallest budget, right? That's not going to show all the time, is probably going to get the impression. There are exceptions if one of the campaigns has an exact match keyword and one doesn't. Google does try to favor now exact match over other match types. Second one would be most restrictive. But if a PMAX campaign exists, then the competition continues. That's not used. So then Google says, is there an exact match keyword identical to the search term? So when Google says identical means spell corrected, which is a little bit iffy, but it does not include singular disposal synonyms. So if someone does a search and you don't have the actual word that someone searched for, and you have PMAX, then it goes to the next step. Next step is, do you have a phrase or broad match keyword identical to the search term? And if you do, and you do not have a PMAX search theme, then the search ad shows. In most accounts, what really happens is you don't have a phrase or broad or exact that's identical, and most accounts don't have search themes. So then what happens to the ad serving? Google gives priority to what they feel is most relevant, right? And that means Google can decide what to pick in your account. And there's multiple relevant options, then Google uses, ad rank. So what often happens is someone does a search and you don't have that identical word, right? So Italy tour guide does not match to Italian tour guides. They're different words. So in that case, different campaigns can start to show what the ad is. Now the reason this is important is if you look at only a search ad slot, we'll ignore all other ad slots, only search. When a search campaign serves an ad to a search ad slot instead of PMAX, 84% of the time it is a higher conversion rate. 84%. Google wants PMAX to do well. They want it to spend money. They want to report to Wall Street. It's how much money they're making with this new AI campaign type. The person took over for Jerry Dreschler. She was on the PMAX team, so it makes the person in charge of Google Ads look good when PMAX spends money. So often PMAX may have worse results, but it still is being favored. And this even goes for brand exclusion. So this company, they're not Papa John's, but they're basically identical. They have brand exclusions for, Papa John's and Papa John's Pizza. PMAX shows for all these other terms. Many of us would consider the spell corrected. They're not considered spell corrected, right? So that's why this old habit of adding your top search terms as exact match keywords, it died with recommendations because Google doesn't recommend anything but broad match. It's still essential to accounts, right? And you could add them in different match types, but negative keywords is also an essential thing still. Your bid method is another guardrail, and bid method. I'm going to go through a little math here. It's sort of misunderstood in how some things work at times. So max conversions, right, or max revenue, it tries you to get the most possible. It doesn't care about the CPA or ROAS. It wants the most possible, regardless of CPA or ROAS. Now, the target bid methods, you're giving them a goal, and their goal is to actually try to hit that target, right? So that's important. Now, what I also want to say is I'm going to go through some stats here, but phrase and broad match are working much different than a couple years ago and are working much different than most would predict. Next week, probably next Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, we're going to publish a crazy amount of data on match size by bid method, which will get even deeper into some of these things. So look for that next week. But let's say I've got a $105 daily budget. So max bidding just says, hey, I want the most conversions possible. It makes mistakes. It might miss one, but it gets 6 of them at a $15 CPA. Target bidding, it's saying I need to average to about $15. It's often a little over or less. It misses some too. So maybe it's $16. They look almost identical, right? There's not a big difference here. Let's say we double our budget. Right now, max bidding says, you want all of them. I'm going to go get all of them. Target starts to say, I can't get some of these because they'll push my target CPA too high. So I have to skip some of these. So now we start to see the difference of Max has more conversions, but a higher CPA. Now, if we take this even further and we put some really expensive conversions at the end, right? CPA bidding says, no, 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 that's way too much for me. Max says, you gave me the budget. I'm going to go get it. Right. And so there's this big difference. So as you add often, broad match or phrase match is crazy expanding right now, even phrase match. Right. Google's like, well, you gave me budget. I can expand these match types a lot. I'm going to try to find these additional ones, which is often why you might see max bidding doing great. And then as you increase budget, the CPA scales upwards a lot. And this is, why when you sort of look at your data by match types, if we look at someone who's doing max bidding, this is a max revenue bid account. Well, broad match is like 0.3 ROAS where phrase and exact are roughly 1. And it's not that broad match is bad here. It's that the goal was saying get us the most possible. So it wants to spend the money because you gave it the okay. Now, this account's target CPA bidding. You know what? Broad match is the same CPA as phrase match. I'm a little higher than exact. That's pretty common. Broad's got a better conversion rate than phrase match, right? So this is where people might say, I like broad match or I don't like broad match. It's actually about bid method, not match types. Now, last one, when you sort of think about how to, again, build for the machines, audiences. This is kind of like the ad groups. Someone will say, okay, we're targeting people who want to take a vacation in Africa. So Kenya Safari, see the pyramids, Rwanda gorillas. These are all things that people do in Africa. They make this giant list that they think is great. But then when you run it, you get stats for the whole list. You don't realize, well, Rwanda gorillas is doing terrible, but the Giza pyramids is doing great. So you can't adjust it based upon things. And so you're trusting the machine to make those decisions, but you don't know if it's doing it or not. So there's no audit of is it serving the better audiences more or less than the worse ones, right? You're sort of blind to the machine now. We have to audit the machine. So this is where even granular audiences, hey, let's make one that is only, maybe Masamar and Kenya Safari. And then let's make it for custom interest, duplicate the same thing, make it searched for. And now we get all these audiences, which we can say, okay, this isn't doing terrible. We shouldn't just, we should just pause it. Or this one's doing great. Do we want to put more budget behind this? Right. So you need to have that data to make those decisions. Same thing goes for audience characteristics, right? Do we need to exclude audiences or not? If you have a low impression share, can you remove your worst times? Right? So Google wants to spend your budget, and they're going to do it within your bid framework, right? They're not going to completely ignore your bid framework and how this works. But if you have a low impression share and you'd have your best conversions between 7 and 4, then you could shrink the times you show your ads because you're not spending your budget, or you can't have all the impressions if your budget's too low. So things like lost impression share budget tell you need to shrink your ad serving, right? If you have zero lost impression share budget and you could spend more, then you often want to expand your ad serving. So impression share can really help you think through, should you expand or contract the impressions you're serving for? By regions, we do the same thing, right? How are you doing by region? And do you have regions doing poorly that maybe this needs to be another campaign so you can split it out and manage the ads and keywords differently by a region? And this includes, interest in versus people in a location. So you can't get this in the interface. I don't know why. You can pull this with a script. We can see it in our software, but we see in a lot of places that are larger cities that interested in outperforms target location. It's commuters. They live in the suburbs, they go into the city, they search while in their city, and if you're only targeting in location, right, often they might not see it. And so this is, important data to look at too as you're making your optimizations. The most controversial pinning, should you pin your RSAs? And this is a math problem too, right? With machine learning, data density is a very important word, right? Machines need data to function. If they have low data density, meaning if you have an RSA with 15 headlines and 2 descriptions, there's 47,000 combinations. So if your ad group gets 1,000 impressions a month after 47 months, 4 years, each combination could have 1 impression, right? So you know what data density doesn't exist. So, Google is good if it has enough data. With low data, Google's terrible with RSAs, and this is why they default right to relevancy. I mean, Google used to promote their 3 Rs, right? Reach, relevancy, and ROAS as why you use Google Ads. And this is where, so relevancy, they say, well, if we don't know what works, we have to pick what's most related to the keywords. Right. So in this case, our ads are terrible. We're basically, our headline 1s and 2s are the same. In fact, Google a few months ago, came out and said, we're going to make it so ads at times can only serve 1 headline. We're not going to serve 2. We're going to serve 1. And in my opinion, it's because of ads like this, where the second line adds nothing and they actually perform better without the second line. It doesn't mean they don't have good assets, right? This company has they've been in business for over 100 years. They are a dry cleaner who picks up and delivers for free at your location in New York City, right? You often don't want to run dry cleaners there. And from their ETA data, they knew that when those lines were displayed, their conversion rate is 357% higher than when they weren't. But those lines aren't related to the keywords, and this company doesn't have a lot of data, so Google just never showed them, right? And this is what pinning does. It lets you say, well, we know it's important that headline 2 shows, and it needs to be one of these 2 highlighted lines. Let's just pin those 2 lines to headline 2. Let Google play with the rest, right? And so what pinning does, it reduces combinations, just a math issue, right? So as you pin, you reduce combinations, meaning each ad combination has better data density. Machine learning works better. Now, there's a lot of falseness out there about pinning, right? Pinning reduces ad strength. Ad strength does not affect quality score or the ad group's impressions or your ability to enter the auction, right? In fact, lower ad strength ads usually have better conversion rates and click-throughs than higher ad strength ads. So the only time it matters is if an ad group has two ads of different ad strength, the higher ad strength gets more impressions. Don't be afraid to pin. And remember, you can pin multiple lines to one place. You could say, these three assets are pinned to headline one. These three assets are pinned to headline two. Now, the one trick we have right now is that if an asset's not pinned, it can show as a site link. So some people love this because all those site links go to the same landing page. If you have assets you do not want to be turned into site links, you can just pin all your assets in any position and they won't turn into site links. And this second ad here, we have 2 lines to 1, 2 lines to 2, 2 lines to 3. If we make one more asset, it can only show as a site link. So we could have additional site links we control the text for that only go to our landing pages. If you want to get more into this, we did a whole video session, which is more than I can cover right now, on testing assets, how to work with ads and RSAs and so forth. Now, negatives, as I mentioned, are incredibly important, and they are. But one of the issues with negatives is most accounts have more search terms than you could ever hope to read. Or you have 10,000 search terms, a million search terms. No one's going to read those. So again, humans need data density too, right? We also want this. So this is where n-grams come into play. So for instance, if I have these search terms, and I could have thousands of these, I don't want to read them all. But what I do want to know is, hey, the word San Diego is in 2 queries. The word plumbing is in 3 queries. The word services is in 4 queries. And understand, right, the words used across queries. So we could aggregate the data by those individual phrases across queries. So for instance, in this account, they're a lawn company, right? And they keep saying things and leisure. Now, the word and leisure is in 265 queries. It has a total of 99 clicks. No human's going to spot this because most of the times this search term is in the query report. It has 0 clicks. But it turns out when it's there, they've spent $1,000 with no conversions. And that's you say, well, what's going on? Well, there's something called Lawn and Leisure Summit. They didn't know this existed. They had no clue. They spent $1,000 advertising for a conference for a competitor they weren't even going to, right? And that's where the n-grams can sort of bring this up. So in reality, we need humans still, right? AI is great. Machine learning is great. Humans override the machine, and AI doesn't always understand machines. This is one of my favorite studies. This research institute, they took rhesus monkeys and they had 3 food containers up. And a monkey walked up to a food container, pressed a button, they got food. All 3 containers gave the same amount of food. So for the first container, they put up a picture of a dominant monkey and some logos. The second one, they put a picture of subordinate monkey and some logos, and then a prina monkey, which is a sexy monkey, and some logos. And then monkeys were free to go get food where they wanted to, and most of them went to the prina line, the sexy monkey line. The second most to the dominant, and the subordinate barely anyone went to. And even after the monkeys got removed later, the logos associated got the same number of clicks as previous when the pictures were there. Now, we can see how humans would sort of behave like monkeys in this particular instance, but a machine would act the opposite. So a machine would say, the most efficient line is a subordinate line. I should put actually more behind that one because I'll get there faster. And the second best line is the dominant line. I should put, my second most amount of data there because that's the second fastest. So the machine would choose the exact opposite of humans. Now, often we say with low data accounts, you're better than machine. And there's a reason for that, right? And that's this concept of prior knowledge. So this was a company did a study where they had this, a game here, right? Like old 16-bit classic, 80s game. And they told people, right, go finish this game and you get a reward. And they also gave this to 40 machine learning algorithms and said, go finish this game, you'll get a reward. Now, you didn't get any feedback until you finished the level. So humans, it took about 3,000 keystrokes or roughly a minute to win. Only one machine learning algorithm finished it. It took 37 hours of gameplay and 4 million keystrokes, 3,000 for a human to finish it. Because a human looks and says, I jump over fire, I climb up and down ladders, I can't go into blank space, right? Easy to do. So the game was modified to use textures. All right, so this confused humans that, okay, the black one is the ladder, and you know, obviously it was different. It took humans about 20 minutes to finish this game. Now, again, the computers, 37 hours, one finished. The game was modified that every time you move towards the completion of the level, a reward point was sent back. Now, computers, everyone finished much faster than a human because it had constant data feedback. Right. So if you're managing accounts without a lot of data, your instinct is probably better than the machine because it doesn't have enough information to work from. And you have prior knowledge of how marketing and how humans work. Right. Machines don't have that yet. So, you know, things like taskless PM systems, third-party organizations, they're still incredibly useful today. Right? So when we sort of think about working with machines, you have your account built, right? And this is just how you're going to build the account. We've been doing this type of strategy for years. But a consideration that's come up, you know, more recently is data density. So Google seems to be using more account level data for bidding as opposed to campaign level data for bidding. They haven't said this yet. I've just seen enough instances. I have a feeling this is starting to occur. So, but you want to think about your data density. And then your bid tech, right, determines your match types. And then you're going to look at your recommendations and say, all right, what do I always say yes to? You can automate that. What do I say sometimes to? Okay, we need the human still. And then you have to audit the machine, right? This is such an important step today. So when we think about what is auditing the machine, what does this mean, right? Well, it means, you know, if we like our recommendations, which is usually scripts or third-party tools, we look at it every day. It's Googled maybe weekly. We look at our KPIs every day, our budget pacing, our disapprovals. Right? Often weekly, you might look at search terms and automatic placements for negatives and bids, and then monthly quality score and so forth. Now, you're going to modify this based upon an account spend, how it functions, its client levels. You know, we have some clients who have millions of audiences, but only hundreds of keywords. They focus on audiences way more than search terms, right? But this is the audit machine is those tasks that were really important to marketers 10 years ago and often get ignored in users who grew up with recommendations. So because when we think about management today, right, we have recommendations, which come from whatever source you want to use. Now you have recommendations you never use, right? So those you dismiss or you change the criteria to be something more useful. If something you always do, well, automate it. If you always do it, automate it. The majority are the it depends favorite PPC answer. In that case, that's that human review, right? And then that's your recommendations and automation section. And then you have your task list, which is like, okay, let me make sure these pieces are working correctly. And that's so important today. Now, this is hosted by PSA. Not all of you are members. If you want to copy the presentation, and I'm going to show a bonus section in a second, join. It's free. There's no reason not to. We're at Alice's. We're a recommendation system, workflow system, paid search management tool, one of the larger ones out there. And we stand behind what we do. We give you a 30-day free trial. So if you're trying to make your life easier with paid search, look us up. And go to PSA, join it, and I'll put this on later, but this really walks through all the tasks and reasons why in much more detail, free for you to get. All right, and with that, Sarah, do we have any questions? If you have questions, everyone, please chime in. Let's have a fun discussion on where are we going with automation and management?
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we actually do have some questions queued up. I'm going to show them on the screen at the same time here. So we have this one coming in from LinkedIn, and it's, are you suggesting that we should not be adding relevant search terms as exact match?
Oh gosh, no, the opposite, If you see a search term doing well, make it an exact match keyword. While it's important if you only run search campaigns, if you run PMAX, it's essential. So no, I'm the opposite.
Okay, perfect. That was a great answer. And so we have Higman, long time
Hey, Anthony.
friend. Yeah, I was like Anthony Higman. On search terms, how much do you think hidden search terms affect campaigns? And do you trust that Google is really limiting them the way that they're saying? He laughed.
Yeah, Anthony, I know your feelings about all this. Yes, I believe hidden terms probably affect campaigns more than we think. Where it's kind of messy is that Google spell corrects then shows terms for search, but they don't seem to spell correct them for the search terms in PMAX. I don't know why one would be spell corrected and one wouldn't, but there are differences. Do I really trust Google's limiting them the way they say they are? From your perspective, no. And it's because Google is so good at legalese that whatever they say, read between the lines like 4 different times, and maybe you're close to an actual answer. They're so good at positioning legalese.
I love that. That's so correct. So while we're waiting on more questions, I have written down a ton here. So here's one. We already got one. I'm going to put the users ahead of myself. So I'm not going to be selfish here. All right. So this one is, should we completely ignore ad strength and utilize 3 pinned headlines and 2 pinned descriptions based on RSA Classic ETA? I'm so curious about this.
All right. So no, right. But so ad strength has 2 recommendations which are useful. So when you're going to edit your ad, the make your headlines more unique shows that you probably don't have a combination of USPs, CTAs, and relevant lines. So that uniqueness is actually useful. Make your headlines relevant to the keywords in the ad group. If you see that, that means your headlines really aren't describing your keywords correctly. So while yes, I ignore ad strength, those 2 recommendations I think are actually really useful to use. Now, should we pin everything is more about how much data do you get. So my favorite these days, for not really a great math reason, just one of my favorites these days, is to pin 3 lines to headline 1 and 3 lines to headline 2. And that's 9 combinations for Google. If you have headline 3 is displayed, it could be 36 combinations. And the real question for me more these days is, do I want to pin headline 3 or not? And the reason I say that is, do I want the assets turned into site links? I think this is sort of a missed thing. Like, I know some people, they've spent hours on their site links by ad group, and they do not want this. So in that case, you really do want to pin all your assets so Google doesn't overwrite your site links. Right now, you could pin to any position. If you're like, hey, I hate that we have to make landing pages and send stuff to about pages and stuff, then these are absolutely fantastic, right? Because now you have more site links going to your landing page. So that's kind of the headline 3 is really more about site links than it is about pinning.
And along the same lines, although changing it to expected click-through rate and quality score, do you find that pinning headlines affect those metrics?
So no, it does not affect them. Expected CTR right now to me is broken. Mm-hmm. I look at expected CTR, and there are times I don't get it. And before, like, I understand how it's done. I understand the math behind this. There's times I think Google just can't figure out, with so many combinations, what quality score should be.
Yeah, no, these are so interesting because you've really dug deep here, and a lot of these questions very similar. So now, how much does quality score affect the ad strength?
And no, unrelated. They're unrelated things. You can have an ad strength of low and a 10 quality score. You could have a 3 quality score and a whatever the top ad strength is, high or whatever it's called. I don't remember. They're unrelated, have no bearing on each other at all.
Okay, so interesting. So this I want to go back to something that you said before more questions come into the chat. So one thing you said, and I happened to have this conversation with another PPC practitioner, is you made a comment about how, I I wrote it down, account level data versus campaign level data. And I find that one really interesting because I had a conversation yesterday about this. I've always believed that to be true with the account level data. And this actually had to do with the AI Max, which I know we didn't get into. But I said that if I were implementing AI Max, I would start it on a new campaign where I could control the budget, because I felt like that campaign would learn from the account as a whole. And I wanted to constrain budget before I went into AI Max. Versus this practitioner felt like you should apply it on an existing campaign to take into account the campaign learning. So I wanted to dig in there.
Yeah. Okay. So historically, Google has used account level data for things like quality score. They've used it for various things. It wasn't used from bid purposes. Now, and right now, I believe they still say that, but I've seen too many examples of companies with 5 to 10 conversions per campaign using target CPA bidding, which historically that combination doesn't work well, but they've got 10 or 20 campaigns and they're all hitting their goals or close to all, because CPA is never quite right. And I've seen more of these in the past 3 or 4 months than probably the past 2 or 3 years, right? To where I think Google is using more of its own data to learn, which I think is fantastic, right? Actually, I'm a big fan of this. I think this is great. I can't prove it. I don't know how you could possibly prove this, but I feel that it's definitely happening. So to your AI Max question, the question becomes, are you testing AI Max to understand if you use it, will you expand and get more, or to manage existing? Because if it's to expand and get more, you'd want a new campaign. So that way, based on Google's hierarchy rules, it wasn't serving over your existing campaign. It would truly be net new.
Correct.
Right. If you're just testing, hey, can we turn this on and it does stuff for us, then you'd probably be existing. So it's different goals of what you want out of the testing.
That absolutely makes sense. And apparently Hickman liked that question too. So here's another question from our audience. Does it make sense to do search campaign combined with audience targeting only option? For example, targeting real estate in Utah with related keywords to people only using apps that are common for medical doctors. I personally do this all the time to constrain budget.
I love it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I if you have enough data, right? Now, obviously there are times you can't, there's not, especially like if you want to do true RLSA, which is your audience list, and you get 1,000 visitors a month, you can't do it. It won't get any impressions. Yeah, if you absolutely.
Thank you.
And this gets into spending your budget properly, right? That's going to be better. More budget there, less budget non-audience, right? Great. Yeah, go for it.
Yes, I would agree there. So another one from Higman here is, do you have workaround, of course, for hidden search terms?
Oh, there used to be 2 workarounds. They're both gone. The only thing that I haven't tested recently to see if it'll work is value track settings. There may be something in value track that triggers that. Outside of value track, no. Universal used to show more than Google Ads did. Universal Analytics, that's gone now. Your MCC query reports, again, Google sunsetted those like 5 years ago, gone. So I don't know any good workarounds except maybe value track. I don't know if that'll work or not.
And then another question for the audience, and people are thanking Anthony for the hard questions. Does account level learning only apply to search network or display campaigns as well?
It's a great question. I have no clue. Right. Display is so inconsistent that my guess is it's not display, because you rarely have very similar display campaigns. They're usually very different. But I have no idea the answer to that question. I just know display, especially video campaigns, seem to be like fantastic 1 week, poor the next week, great the next week. They seem to ebb and flow so much. I'm not sure. Yeah, and I doubt it, but I don't really know.
Okay, perfect. No, I wouldn't have known that answer either. So I guess I want to go back to also sort of a topic with keywords. So one of the things you were talking about is if you find the keyword, adding it into search campaigns. So when I was looking at what am I saying? PMAX campaigns in one of the accounts I was auditing, one of the things I noticed, and it has to do with, I'm going to call it, for easy's sake, the DSA component, but I also know from looking at this client that they did not have pages on this topic. So I found it very interesting in the PMAX search campaigns, and it was also a restaurant. I'm not going to give away the client. So the people are looking for like grilled cheese restaurant, tomato soup restaurant. I mean, it was really specific, clearly having some type of craving. But if I had really gone into that rabbit hole and started creating campaigns around every possible menu item, you can imagine where I'd be going with that.
Okay, so odds are, right? Let's Maria Corcoran, who no one ever hears from anymore. She wrote an amazing article 15 years ago, right, or something, on how search partners are sometimes not search sites. And you'll have a company who has a massive website, and Google looks at the URLs with their H1 tags to serve ads, but they're big enough to be search partners, not display. But the ads are triggered off of, title tags or URLs or so forth, and that is your search term in Google. So that's why when you see like, did 1,000 people really search for 00748 Samsung 36-inch P1000i TV? No, they went to a URL or a search partner, and that's what triggered the ad. So to your example there, I would take a look at the search partners, because I doubt it's search.
Genius. Okay. That's a really good, and in a lot of ways, that ties back to what I know about old school SEO, right? Which makes sense because Google is crawling. All right. I mean, they're crawling for DSA. Okay. So audience is hot with some questions. I'm going to put another one up here. And this comes from Erin, and she wants to know, I'm getting more near me. How are we dealing with search terms that end in this?
Eric, I hate this query so much. Google invented this query. And you know what? All of you have terrible quality scores for it, because you can't write ads near me. You put it in geography, but the geography isn't near me. Everyone has the same problem. Your quality scores are terrible. There is no solution to this problem right now. If you find one, please post it on LinkedIn. We will all share it, every one of us, because it is an awful problem. Near me converts well for most people, but they can't write good ads. Their quality scores are terrible. It looks bad, but it works. And it's all Google's fault for advertising with this term.
That's a really great point. So this is a slightly different question. Are you going to publish?
Not anytime. It would be like 1,500 pages now, right? The last one was what, 800 pages? Like, it would be insane.
I love
and
that.
Things change too fast.
True.
They change too fast right now.
Wow, questions are coming in so fast now. Do these concepts apply to Microsoft Bing?
99% of these do. Nava, if you're here, I'm sure you'll put it out some article of like which ones don't apply. So I'll leave that to Nava to answer, but for the conceptually, absolutely yes.
Yeah, I love that. Here's another one. Have you had success using PMAX for lead gen? I seem to get a ton of junk, even though so he's doing the right thing with uploading offline.
Yes, but it's inconsistent, right? So some people are doing well with PMAX for lead gen. Now, what I would caution are a few things. One, if you're a local business, they're often driving directions off of maps.
Yeah.
And so it's not that PMAX is doing well, it's stealing your map impressions.
Yeah.
I hate that one. There's no pattern to why some people do well with it and some don't. And we'll see people who only are using, very specific ways. And so right now, I think this is why there's a big pullback, like my third slide or something on PMAX lead gen. It's worth trying, but if it doesn't work, don't bang your head trying to make it work. Just get rid of it.
True. I heard a long time ago, it's like being in the parking lot of Walmart, getting directions to Walmart. You're already there with the maps.
Yep.
So this one, any insights from portfolio bid strategies versus campaign?
No, I mean, they're both great. There's not, I mean, campaign level lets you, especially if you've got a bunch of campaigns using slightly different metrics. Larger accounts, portfolio, super useful.
Yeah.
I use whatever one makes sense to you. I wouldn't say there's insight differences, but I mean, I use portfolio a lot when it makes sense.
So I used it most recently because I had to segment campaigns for reporting purposes, but I wanted them combined for budget sharing purposes. So, I mean, it was an operational reason.
Yeah. I mean, I think my only problem with some of the, shared budget portfolio things is that Google might sometimes overserve one, and instead of saying this campaign does the best, give it the best budget versus this is the second best, the second most budget, et cetera, like a waterfall effect. That doesn't always happen. So sometimes you get slightly better results going campaign level budgets and bids, but for the most part, portfolio works great for most people.
Yeah. So another question, do you have any thoughts or opinions of large language models to help manage accounts, theme grouping, ad rank, or impression share?
I have many thoughts. I find them from an idea standpoint amazing. Like, I love going and saying, like, this is what I'm advertising for. Give me ad group ideas. And then even segmenting it down into different parts of the buying funnel, and then having it do the ad suggestions, even by buying funnel stages if we're going to do buying funnel segmentation. But half the suggestions are awful, right? Half of them are, well, 25% are great, 25% you would have thought of yourself, 50% you're like, that's what a terrible suggestion. I would not use an LLM to manage my account right now by any means. From a data analysis standpoint, here's a bunch of unrelated keywords, group them for me. You still need to proof it. It's a great first step, though. It's a great first step to just quickly do, but I wouldn't copy and paste from it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree there. So this one, going back to your location, still getting people outside. What can I do besides excluding locations?
You can't. So what happens there is, like, my wife works 5 miles from our house. Doesn't matter if you target her home location or her work location. She's in both regularly, and they're right next to each other. So you know what? There's no way, because it's in or regularly in, you're gonna see that difference. There's not a good way to do it right now. The only thing you can do is, like, add geographic keywords to a geographically targeted campaign, but your impressions drop so much, it's not worth it. There's no good solution right now to this.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I don't see more questions in the chat, so I get a question, which is always
actually
exciting.
I take that back. You could do exclusions in the areas around you. I mean, I think that's
what
you alluded to already, right?
So actually, I'll kind of go back to that one. So, like, if I've ever been managing an account in New York City, I feel like this has been super important. It's just really, like, getting super granular in those exclusions. It does feel like whack-a-mole, but sometimes when you're trying to save budget anywhere you can, taking the time to exclude on top of inclusions can be super important. So I loved when you went back to old school stuff. I bet you have the best screenshots ever from your years. So I wanted to talk about task-based management because I totally agree with you with regards to that. So pretend somebody comes brand new and they're like, I don't even know what tasks to think about. First of all, does your calendar still exist? And then if not, what would be a good first step for them to start to sort of train their brain to think of, like, their weekly tasks?
Yep. So if the calendar exists, I don't know, it would have content bids on it still, right? Like, we haven't had the content network in years.
Yeah.
So the presentation, the bonus section, which I dropped through, right? You can download it, has every task on it with a bit more detail of why you do it.
Correct.
So that's really going to be your starting place of, this is daily and why I do this daily, right? This is weekly and why. Those of you more experienced are going to adjust those, right? Some of you should be doing some of these daily, some may be quarterly, right? But I would say that's your starting place. And then pay attention to the repairs category in Google Ads. So I'm not a huge fan of Google recommendations. I don't think most people are, but the repairs category is super useful. But again, use your brain, because like one of them is remove conflicting keywords. Sometimes you actually want the keyword removed, not the negative keyword removed, right? Google only lets you easily remove the negative keyword, not the keyword itself. So make sure even with those, you use your brain and how things work.
Yeah, and I actually wrote a search engine land post the other day that I said even that, like, the application of it should be done with caution or by the human, but the suggestion in itself isn't flawed. But I had an example of one of my colleagues had duplicate keywords, broad and exact. And of course, it took away the exact and left the broad when she applied it through the platform. So just again,
and that's how. We're almost done here. So that's how analysis works. Is I've been writing accounts for 27 years. So we suggest by default for the human to use their brain.
Yes.
And then you can automate, right? Or you can
Exactly.
overwrite our automation and say, no, I want this criteria instead. And I think that's the piece that Google misses is let me redefine the criteria for getting a suggestion.
Exactly. Okay, so we're 1 minute over. I'm going to be nice and let one last question slide because we get used to not as often as we would like. I manage certain accounts that don't have enough budget. Not all is being spent, and I still don't get traffic coming in. Any tips?
Hold on. So I manage certain accounts that have enough budget.
Oh yeah, she's giving them the money.
Okay, but not
Google's
all is
not
being
taking
spent,
it.
and I don't get enough traffic coming in. So in some cases, you can't do anything. I'm just going to say this now, right? You want to spend $1 million a month for a lawyer in Fargo, you can't do it. Right? So there are sometimes it's just not possible. You're going to look at, can the company expand, right? Sometimes companies can expand beyond what they are. Then maybe that's putting the onus back on the business. How is the account currently restricted? So is the account restricted due to its time of day settings, do other things like that, right? Can you change that reach some? Number 3, what's your quality score? Because if your quality scores are really bad, you might have a lot of restricted ad serving or not serving. So making sure that you're not restricting yourself to either quality score, you have limited ad approvals for whatever reason that don't need to be limited, so forth. Your next step is, can you add more keywords, right? Are there more targeting to be had? This is where, Google suggestions, ChatGTP, and if you have enough conversion data, even broad match can be useful. And we're going to do another one of these in a little bit because a broad match with some bid methods is surprisingly better than I thought it was. I'm changing my mind on broad match. Anthony, we can have that discussion later. Right. So next then is, are there other channels you want to use? So maybe you jump to Meta, right? Instead of Google, and say, can we spend it on Meta or Microsoft? Then do you want to test demand gen or PMAX or something? Again, getting more into display. Do you need to just make more demand awareness, right? So that's YouTube video campaigns. So if you can't spend it because they have too big of a budget for what exists, then there's nothing you can do. But in some cases, it might be, how do we make our own demand, right? And that's where video or display can be very useful. So hopefully that gives you some ideas to kind of think about. Sarah, do you have any to add?
No, I agree. I mean, I'm always a fan also adding a DSA and keyword exploration. And then I always say, like, broaden somewhere, right? Match type, targeting. I mean, unfortunately, you got to go wide to come back in and be efficient. It's like the old school cast a wide net and then become more efficient. But your metrics aren't always going to be ideal. So it's exactly what you said.
And you know what? I have one last one. If you're using target CP or target ROAS bidding, can you ask the company, would you rather have more sales if they were more expensive and increase bids?
Yeah.
I'm not a Google rep.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you so much. I think this is fantastic. Cannot wait to have you back, and to the audience and everyone who's stayed along. This will definitely happen again. So thank you all for being here. Is there any last thing, like how to contact you? We'll put everything on the Paid Search Association. Thank you for the plug there.
You can find me on LinkedIn. I
Yeah.
live on LinkedIn way more than any other social platform.
Same.
So that's the easiest place to get a hold of me. Or you can go to our website at alicesis.com.
Yes.
We write a blog with a ton of information. We don't publish much, but when we do, it's worth reading.
Good. Yes. Awesome. Well, thanks again. And thank you for everyone who came today.
Enjoy.
All right. All right. Perfect.